What's the creepiest non-paranormal thing that's happened to you? I've told this story before, I think, but this is the right place for it. When I was a kid, we'd go to these beach cabins in Maryland, right by the Chesapeake. They were small, rustic ordeals with basic comforts, nothing fancy like TVs or air conditioning. 2 bedrooms and a cot in the kitchen, and my siblings and I rotated on the cot so that no one got too sore from it. A small tradition was that my mom and I would have a hot cup of tea before bed, in our summer jammies, and just our way of relaxing while everyone else went off to read or listen to music. Well, one night I was settling onto the cot when she picked up the tea kettle to fill it. Out of the corner of my eye I see her flinch, then say in a steady voice, "What are you doing there?" My head whipped over to the kitchenette to see her looking out the window. Then she jumped back and started screaming for my father. Somehow he knew crap was getting real, ran from the back bedroom and barely paused to see my mom point towards the left side of the house. He burst out the door and towards the left of the cabin. I'll be the first to admit I ran like a mother and baseball slid under my parents' bed, because damn it I was 10 and that's what kids do when they're terrified. I still remember the smell of the old wood and the feel of my teddy bear shielding me from whatever the heck was happening. I remember seeing my 14-year-old brother, then a medium-ranking karate student, following my dad out of the cabin at full speed. The rest of the story is an amalgamation of what I heard and what my family filled in for me. My father, a former army sergeant and MP with a Bronze Star, managed to tackle the guy that had been peeping into our kitchen window. He put him in an elbow lock face down on the ground, my brother standing sentinel over both of them while my mom ran to get the cell phone we'd bought just 2 weeks earlier. This was in '95 when those suckers had cords and everything. While my mom called 911, I remember hearing the guy talking. He was saying things like, "The Ouija board fricking told me. I want the devil to suck my fricking brains out. Satan is in cabin 10. I have to get to cabin 10. The devil wants me to kill myself," and so on. We were in cabin 3, over half a mile from where he apparently intended to meet the devil. My dad kept a grip on him for probably a good 15 minutes until the cops showed up. The first thing out of the one's mouth was, "Jamie, when did they let you out?" He'd been released from jail just 2 weeks earlier, for arson. You know where he was standing when my mom was at the sink in the kitchen, right beside the propane tank. Your ending made me clinch a little. I had a party at my apartment with my friends from college. We had music, beer pong, drinks, typical party, pretty low key. There were only like 12 of us, just looking for something to do on a Sunday night since we had the Monday off. We live in a complex that has a bunch of rows of townhomes and a huge parking lot. It was about 11:30 p.m. and there is a knock at the door. Figuring it was one of our neighbors, I opened the door. There was a very pale, skinny, bleach blonde girl standing there. She looked sickly, like a serious drug addict. She asked if any of us had a lighter, and my friend Nick gave her one. She walked into our apartment and lit her cigarette in our kitchen while everyone stood there silently and awkwardly, watching her. She stood there for a minute, looking around, then abruptly said thanks and walked out the door. Our window was open, and we saw her walk down the steps to the parking lot and get in a car directly in front of our window, watching us. There was another girl and a guy in the car with her, equally sickly looking. We laughed it off, and the party went on. Every so often, however, we would look out the window and the same car would be there, the people always watching us. This carried on until about 1:30 a.m. when the 3 got out of their car and knocked on our door again. Nick opened it to see what the heck they wanted. He's an extremely intimidating looking guy, and the blonde girl said with virtually no expression, "We just wanted to know if we could come in. You guys look fun, like beer pong fun." We politely declined, since it was late and people would be leaving soon, and she got irate and started screaming at us that we were idiots. We closed and locked the door. They walked back to their car and watched us again. Everyone started to leave around 2:30 a.m. The only people left were my roommate and I, 2 20-year-old females. The car was still there, still watching. My roommate and I sat at a kitchen table, talking about what we should do, and the car started flashing their lights into our window, which went on for a few minutes. We shut the lights off and closed the blinds, but peeked through them to see what was going on. The car sat there for a few more minutes, then drove away. It was one of the most bizarre moments of my life. That chick was casing the joint. Man, they wanted to rob the frick out of y'all. I was standing in my kitchen talking with my dad and suddenly we hear the very loud sound of breaking glass. We went outside and walked around the house looking for broken windows etc. Found nothing. The next morning I was getting breakfast and I opened the kitchen cupboard and glass just poured out onto the counter and all over the floor. TLDR. Every glass in my cupboard shattered simultaneously while my father and I were in the room. When my wife and I had our old house built, one of the first things we noticed the night we moved in is that the house behind us had a square window that seemed to be right next to their toilet, but probably 5 feet above the floor. We figured this was the case because at various times during the night, we could see just the profile of a dude's head there. He would stand there for like 30 seconds and then he would leave and the light would go off. It became sort of a running joke. Once in a while we would just look out the back window and go, "Hey up, Russell is taking a leak again." One night it was storming pretty badly and the power went out in the neighborhood. I was just looking out the back window at the storm and I happened to notice what I thought was the profile of Russell's head in the little window when lightning lit up the area. I had some funny thoughts about trying to aim in the dark and wondered why he wasn't peeing with a flashlight or something. Then a lightning bolt a full 5 minutes later revealed Russell's head again. WTF. That was some epic pee. I ran and got my binoculars to see if I could figure out what was going on over there. More lightning strikes and I was fairly certain Russell's head was still in the window, but it looked strange. Then suddenly the power kicked back on and my sights were filled with the image of a female mannequin head in Russell's window, facing directly at our window. I used to work weekend nights and my wife would always be home alone with her car in the driveway. One particular Saturday, I was at work and my wife happened to go out with her friend. Her friend picked her up, so her car was still in the driveway. When I got home at 1 AM, the power to the house was out. I went to check the circuit breaker and saw that the padlock on it had been cut. I promptly went inside and called 911. Here is the conclusion I have come to, though I'm open to alternatives. Someone had been watching us for a while and knew our habits. That Saturday, they saw her car in the driveway and my car gone. They cut the lock and threw the circuit breaker. This would have baited her outside. She would have been outside with the front door unlocked and quite vulnerable. I bought a nice bottle of wine for her friend and a shotgun for the house. TLDR. Someone tried to bait my home alone wife outside by throwing the circuit breaker. She thankfully wasn't home. I work nights sometimes and when I do my wife stays with her mom. I have a home alarm system and live in a 3-story house. The past few weeks my alarm has been going off when I am not at home. They call me and tell me that the motion detector in the hallway was triggered. Over and over again I get home and the door is still locked and no signs of movement. I should add that I have no pets. One day after the alarm was triggered I got home and the front door was wide open. My wife says she swears she closed it. My only guess is she did not close it all the way and the wind blew it open. To this day I feel like someone is in my house hiding until I leave. It doesn't help that my son says weird stuff like the monsters are upstairs or the man wants to play. He woke up one morning and said the blue man was at the window. When I was a young child living in one of the high crime areas of town, I woke up in the middle of the night out of nowhere. This was something that never, ever happened to me, given how sound of a sleeper I was. I left my bedroom, went down the stairs and past the front door to get to the kitchen. After getting a drink of water I turned around to go back upstairs to my bedroom. The front door was open. It hadn't been open just a moment ago. Our car had been broken into a day earlier, so I was already on high alert. I stood, completely frozen, staring at that door for a good 10 minutes before I could bring myself to move. When I finally did go over and shut the door, our porch creaked in the background as though someone was walking on it as I closed it. It was the scariest moment of my childhood. I still get the willies thinking about it. I was out hunting in northern Ontario. No roads, except for logging roads, within 130 kilometers. I was late on the bear season so no one was out hunting in my quadrant. I found a nice campsite alongside a river and hunted from there. On the second day of my hunt I came across the bear tracks. I tracked it for about 2 hours, and then turned around. This is when crap got very frickin' weird. I always track on one side of the tracks and return on the other. About 200 meters down the east side of the tracks I ran into another human footprint which disappeared across the trail and into the woods on the west. My dog, check wolf dog, didn't seem to smell anything, so I returned to camp with minimal concern. I got back to camp at around 7:30 at night, made a quick dinner and had a cigar by the camp. At around 12 o'clock I heard a snap of a branch. After hunting for 20 years only two things snap branches: bears and humans. I grabbed my firearm and a flashlight and went out after the noise. Every 100 yards, I would scan with the flashlight. My dog freaked, started growling and advancing into the woods slowly. I pulled back on my leash to slow his advance and switched on my flashlight. I saw a pair of eyes looking right back at me. It stared for about 5 seconds and disappeared into the woods. On the walk back I felt anxious, scared, and uncomfortable. I could feel someone watching me. The next night, the same thing happened. My dog went wild. Like I have never seen him. He was whimpering, growling, and clearly very anxious. At this point I was terrified. I didn't go hunting that day and didn't close my eyes once. That night I sat up with my flashlight, constantly scanning the tree line. I guess I dozed off at around 1 and woke again at 3. I was sweating, confused, and very scared. I scanned the forest, and just barely visible about 25 yards in the forest there was a man and his dog. He was looking right back at me. I stared to approach him, shouting to him. I got within 10 feet. He looked awfully disheveled and stank. The worst part was that he just stared and smiled. His eyes showed zero emotion and whispered good night. I ran back to my tent, packed it into my pack and loaded it onto the trailer of the ATV and drove out of there. Freaking heck. I don't know if I would have even taken the time to pack. I once dreamt a whole day. It was creepy because I was 100% convinced I was living a Friday when it was actually Thursday. My dream consisted of everyday things: waking up, going to school, etc., and I went back to sleep and woke up on Friday. Not necessarily creepy I guess, but min-fucking. Once I got up in the middle of the night with a start, like we all sometimes do. I thought nothing of it and went to get a glass of water in the kitchen. Well, when I opened my bedroom door, one of my cats was at the end of the hallway looking back at me with huge dilated pupils. My half asleep and parched self didn't care, so I walked to the end of the hallway toward the kitchen. As I was walking, I watched her eyes and noticed that she didn't follow my eye contact and eventually run for the food dish like she always would. Rather, she stayed put and continued to focus her gaze on something behind me. Whatever it was, it pissed her off because her fur was on end from head to tail. Without looking back, I sat down right in front of her and attempted to calm and pet her. Yet the second I sat down, she moved to my right and crouched down, continuing to stare behind me. Up until this point I had pretty much thought that she'd just been startled by me opening my bedroom door. Then, I saw she wasn't quite looking directly at my door, so I thought she was playing or fighting with my other cat. Nope, he was asleep in the kitchen. I stood up and briefly looked down the hallway. My open door and illuminated bedroom was in clear view. But that wasn't what she was infatuated with. What had her attention was the open door to the dark, featureless guest bedroom next to mine. Denying myself the urge to freak out, I quickly passed my cat, got my water, and walked past her again straight back to bed, avoiding even glancing at the dark guest bedroom. While shutting the door, I looked again at her and saw that she still hadn't broken her creepy as frick staring contest with whatever was in the guest bedroom. Frick my cat. TLDR. Frick my cat. Denying myself the urge to freak out. As I read this I laughed a little. I hate that feeling when your body says frick run but you try to tell yourself in your head, don't run, everything is fine. You always end up walking really fast right before you get to your safe place. The summer after I graduated from high school I worked as a highway litter crew supervisor. I drove 2 younger teens around and had them pick up litter on the side of the road. One day one of the kids flagged me over to him and showed me a weird bag he'd found. The bag was a very thick, semi-translucent plastic, double bagged and tied off at the top with black electrical tape. It was down in a ditch covered with brush, so the kid and I dragged it to the side of the road for closer inspection. It was really heavy and it took 2 of us to get it out of the ditch. Once we got it to the roadside, it became apparent that the bag was filled with a reddish brown slush and a bunch of hard pieces, bones. It was then that I realized that this was a sack filled with a rotting corpse of some kind. I called my boss, and he told me to call the police. The police showed up pretty nonchalantly, but became visibly upset once he'd inspected the bag himself. He took down my statement and contact information, then shooed us along as he called into the station for assistance. We never heard anything back from the police, and I never did find out what, or who exactly, was in the bag. 3 years ago, on a very hot summer day, we could see some dark clouds forming on the horizon from our garden. So me and my little brother fired up our PC and checked the weather radar. There was a pretty bad patch of rain and thunder on a collision course with our town. When the clouds were finally over our heads, the whole family was in the yard looking at lightning that was cracking some miles away. Out of nowhere, lightning hit our greenhouse, which I was 2-3 meters away from. I could actually feel the static on my arm hair and saw my own shadow in the whitish blue light as I ducked out of reflex. The buzzing sound was intense as an arc of lightning crawled across the iron gutters of the greenhouse. This all happened in 1.5 seconds. Next moment, all of my family members were with me under our back porch, all quite literally shocked. No one hit. Creepiest thing I can recall by far. Being the manager of a clothing store, I sometimes help other stores out too. A few weeks ago, I was asked by my boss to work a night shift at a store located in a different mall. I've never been to that mall before and figured working there would be interesting, so I took the shift. The mall closed at 10 PM and I left the store by 11:30 PM. Walking back to the parking structure was kind of creepy. The concrete structure was dimly lit. There were still several cars left in the structure, probably belonging to mall employees. I had completely forgotten where I had parked, so there I was, aimlessly wandering the parking structure looking for my car. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw an elderly homeless man coming towards me. He asked me, "You looking for your car?" And not wanting to be rude, I responded yes. The homeless man nodded and beckoned for me to follow him. Not really knowing what to do, I decided to follow. We walked for about 5 minutes across the structure and up a flight of stairs. Then he stopped right in front of my car and told me it's not safe to drive a car that's low on motor oil, and then proceeded to walk away. Getting into my car, I noticed that it was low on oil. I have no idea how he knew where my car was or how he knew it was low on oil. Misunderstood homeless guy helps strangers diagnose car problems. Get called creepy on internet forums. I was babysitting my 4-year-old cousin last week. Everything was normal. I put him to bed, read him a book, and he fell asleep. 20 minutes later, I'm laying on the couch and I hear him whispering from the hallway. I get up and sneak up to hear what he's saying. "They're scratching my face. They are scratching my face." He said it in a calm voice and I asked him who, but he didn't answer. I walked him back to bed despite my racing heartbeat. Crap seemed like it was straight out of a movie. Just last weekend actually, there was a really bad storm as my girlfriend and I were driving up Interstate 69 in Indiana toward Muncie. It hadn't rained here in like a month, so we were pretty pumped. Anyway, this storm kinda built up really quickly and just started pouring. We didn't think anything of it at first, happy for the long due rain. But suddenly, the wind picked up really badly. Dust and debris in the fields around us suddenly lifted into the air and began swirling around in a giant funnel shape around the car, maybe a football field length on either side of the car. My girlfriend, who is terrified of storms, was freaking out, thinking there was going to be a tornado that dropped on top of our car. I kept it together but definitely laid on the gas pedal. For a few moments, the wind blew from left to right. Then a few seconds later it was blowing right to left. Anyway, we made it through with no problems. When we got to where we were going, some of the guys said they watched a funnel cloud dropped about halfway to the ground for about 30 seconds right over where we were. Later that night, it was confirmed on the news. A spotted funnel cloud. Again, right where we were. We had driven through what was almost a tornado and it was intense as frick. Creepiest feeling I've ever had, knowing that if I had merely looked up, I would have seen the start of a tornado dropping down onto my car. Probably would have been myself, to be honest. TLDR. Drove through what was almost a tornado. Looking up would have revealed a half-formed funnel cloud descending from the sky. Fell asleep on a lawn chair in my friend's backyard. We were swimming in his pool, so I was sun drying and catching some tan. I wake up, not knowing how long I'd been asleep for, but my trunks were dry and the sun had moved. At least an hour and a half. I look to my right, and 8 feet away is my friend reclined. He's eating a bag of bugles, and his male husky is fricking his foot. Actually fricking his foot. Has the pink chain between his toes. He's just sitting there eating bugles like it's no thing. So I make a noise and sit up and he pushes the dog away and says, "What you trying to do tonight?" He doesn't realize I saw it. He doesn't know I know. He asks me why I don't chill much anymore, and I'd love to tell him why, but I'm not going near that crap. All set. Moral of the story, only creepy people eat bugles. I was walking in Boston through an intersection, Boylston and Tremont few assholes, and all of a sudden, a coffee bean showed up in my hand. I had no idea where it came from. I'm putting this here because it probably wasn't paranormal, although I really have no idea. I was visiting a school in New York a few months back. I'm from the West Coast. My mom and I are on the train from Grand Central to Poughkeepsie, and this train had a bathroom on it. When we got on there was standing room only, so we and about 5 other people were standing by the bathroom. This older man, about 45, starts chatting with us. He asks where we're from. We had our bags with us, what brings us to New York, and talks about how this was his daily commute. He was very kind to me and my mother. So as we're riding along, a man comes out of the bathroom in quite a huff, and the kind man we'd been talking to excuses himself to go to the bathroom. Remember, the train is moving at full speed at this point. A couple minutes later, a woman and her small child ask if the bathroom is occupied. So all of us who were standing around the bathroom answer yes. 5 minutes pass, then 10 minutes, until she becomes skeptical. She pulls open the door, and it's unlocked. The bathroom is empty. What the frick? There are no windows in this bathroom. There is only one door. We all agreed we hadn't seen him leave, and all of us who had been there when he went and were dumbfounded. Where had this guy gone? I never found out. I never saw him again. I still have no idea what happened. On a similar vein, yesterday my mom was waiting for the bathroom on an airplane for about 10 minutes, so she knocked on the door and there was no answer. A flight attendant comes over at her request, knocks again, and unlocks the door. It clearly said it was occupied. Empty. He said that earlier turbulence probably jiggled the lock into that position, but I don't know. I was totally expecting the guy from the train to come out of the bathroom on the plane and say, "Tater." I was watching TV, in the media room, home theater type deal, no windows etc. of my parents' house when I was 13-14. It was probably about 2:30 AM when I hear the doorbell ring. Mind you, I grew up in a relatively rural area, not country necessarily, but houses in our neighborhood were on 5-acre lots. Our house was situated a couple hundred yards off the road, at the end of a long, winding driveway that went through a pretty thick patch of woods. My point being, it required effort to get to our door. It was very unlikely that somebody would just wander up, but I digress. Back to the media room where 13-year-old me has peed his pants. So I'm laying there on the carpet scared shitless, because who the frick rings a doorbell at 2:30 AM? With good intentions, my parents' room is on the opposite end of the rather large house. To get there I have to run through our kitchen, entryway, and living room, all of which have floor-to-ceiling windows, because my mom likes natural light or some crap. I make it to the kitchen and duck behind the island in the middle, my back towards the front of the house, where presumably the axe murderer rapists are, except they weren't there, Saint least not both of them. I looked out the back window at the silhouette of a man, with his hand cupping his face so that he could get a better look inside. Frick that noise, I thought, so I got up and made a mad dash for my parents' bedroom. As I did, the man at the back illuminates me with a flashlight, following me as I run. I can hear him knocking on the glass as I reach the hallway to my parents' bedroom. As I rounded the corner, I ran directly into my dad, who had obviously been woken up by the commotion and was going to investigate. Side note, I didn't know my dad owned a gun until that night when I saw him walk out of his room with it. He grabbed me and with a very stern and serious tone said, "Get in the room with your mom. Lock the door behind you and don't open it for anybody but me." Very freaking now. I locked the door and hid in the corner. Time seemed to slow down. I heard the sound of the front door unlocking, my dad twisting the handle, the door opening, then holy crap. Sorry officer, I didn't realize. After a short conversation between my dad and the police, I heard my dad open the door again. The police wanted to have a quick look around to make sure everything was normal. You know, being as a man had just answered the door wearing nothing but boxer shorts, with a loaded pistol in his hand. They looked around, surmised that all was as it should be, apologized, then left. Apparently, the phone lines in our neighborhood were fricked up or something because we were the 5th house in a week to ghost call 911. They said they figured the same thing had happened to us, but they were still obligated to investigate every call as if it was an actual emergency. TL. DR. Troll cop cometh. I just realized, this is the first story in this thread that the call was coming from inside the house. I had gotten a check and I distinctly remember putting it on my desk where I always put important papers so I wouldn't lose it. Later that day when I went to grab it, it was gone. I looked for the check for weeks without any luck. One night after getting home from work, I was just about to get out of the car and I looked down and the check was in my lap. How it got from my desk to my car I still have no idea. Maybe it was behind your ear, like a coin. When I was about 8 years old, I was playing at the local park with my best friend, who was 7. This was during the time of get yourself home before the streetlights come on. It was getting dark, but not dark enough for us to go home. We lived in a small, well-to-do village in the Lake District where everyone knew each other and everyone was friendly in the eyes of an 8-year-old. We were both playing on a swing set when I looked at a nearby house and saw a guy, mid-30s, filming us, just standing on his doorstep with a camera pointing straight at us. Being naive, we just ignored him, but 10 minutes later he was still there, the camera up to his eye and looking at us. We freaked out and ran home to tell our parents. Their response: "If it happens again, tell us and we'll call the police." Typing this out doesn't convey the soul-freezing fear I felt at the time, but just thinking back makes me feel cold and paranoid. I'm not supposed to tell you this, but you're the star of your own little Truman Show. Do try to be dramatic this week. It sweeps and you don't want to see what happens if you get cancelled. So my mother works with mental patients. Well, she doesn't, but runs security over all of the company's residencies so she occasionally has to deal with them. One night, at around 9, she told me she had to go to work cause there was an emergency. So later I get a phone call from her. She basically said my name and before she could finish the phone got pulled away from her. In this high pitch, creepy butt voice one of the patients says Devon 302. I assume she heard my name mentioned by my mom. Devon 302, your mom isn't coming home tonight because I'm going to do something bad to her. Then she hung up. I started freaking out and my mom decided to wait 2 hours after to call me back. Woman ended up getting arrested, but released since she has a mental illness. Creepy as heck. Very unnerving. I started freaking out and my mom decided to wait 2 hours after to call me back. Sounds like something my parents would do. This is first time I have really talked about this moment in a long time. I don't remember all the details but I will do my best. When I was in high school, my friend and I caught a 10 or 11 PM showing of some movie. The parking for the movie theater was on the 6th floor of parking structure. I parked my car at the far off end of the lot because it was absolutely packed at night. When we got out of the movie probably around 1 AM, the lot was totally empty except for my car. We walked towards it and I jumped into driver's side and started the car. However, my friend on the other side didn't move from behind my car. I rolled down the window and asked him what he was doing. He told me to get out of the car. I didn't understand what the heck he was talking about until I leaned over and looked through the passenger window. I saw a girl curled up leaning against the wall next to my car. I got out and walked around and saw she just had a top on, no underwear or pants, and she was sobbing. We asked if she was alright, but she didn't say anything and kept sobbing. At that point, we assumed she must be fricked up on something and just ending up laying in the lot. Since cell phones weren't really around at that time, I decided to head back into the theater and ask someone to call the cops. But the doors were locked and all the lights were off. I head back over to my car and the condition of the girl was the same. I asked her if she wanted me to drive her somewhere and again no response. At that point, I told my friend we will just head out and call the cops from a payphone on the street. He agreed, and while we were getting into my car, we saw a person walk up one of the ramps on the other side of the lot. This is where it gets fuzzy, but I think my friend saw what looked like a gun in his hand. He screamed at us, "Get the frick away from my girl," or something to that nature, and started sprinting towards my car. I immediately freaked and I screamed at my friend to get in the car. He jumps in and I floored it past the guy screaming at us. He hits my cars as we go by and I peel down the reaming floors out of the parking structure. I stopped at the first payphone I saw and called the cops and reported what happened. A couple days later, we found out that the dude chasing us was a pimp and the girl was one of his age. What events led up to that incident, I never found out. TLDR. Google Maps took me on a creepy and totally pointless detour in the middle of the night. A friend and I were driving across the state, Michigan, to pick up another friend and go to a concert. We got lost on our way because Google Maps told us to get off the highway and take back roads. Long story short, by the time we got to my friend's college to pick him up, the concert had started and we had a 45-minute drive to the venue. We bailed on the concert and just hung around Rochester. It got to be around midnight, and the drive home takes 3 hours, so we said our goodbyes and hit the road. Once again, Google Maps told us to get off the highway and take some kind of backwoods road. The first sign that something creepy was going to happen was the "Don't Pick Up Hitchhikers" sign. We made a joke about it and kept driving. The directions told us to turn right onto a road and, because we didn't look ahead on the list, we followed the turn. We wound up on a dirt road that quickly narrowed down to a little less than 2 proper lanes. If a car had been coming from the other way, I'm not sure how we would have squeaked by. On our right, there was a big, open field. On our left, trees. None of the trees had any leaves on them, even though it was one of the warmest Octobers we had had in years. Mid-70s all through September and into October. We drove up this road for a while and came to a stop sign. Pulled through, and saw some spooky farmhouses off to our right. We're talking run-down 2-story homes with burnt-out barns and long driveways. Only one of the houses had any lights on. One light at the top of the house. An attic, maybe, or an upstairs bedroom. After that house, there was a cemetery, and not a little country cemetery, with a couple dozen graves. We're talking rows and rows of dead people stretching into the dark. Oh, did I forget to mention that? It was pitch black along these roads. Just my high beams for light. After the cemetery we were supposed to take a left onto another dirt road. We did so in complete silence. I had turned the music down because it seemed way too loud for what was happening. We drove down this new dirt road, now totally surrounded by bare trees. Then we came to another street and our directions said to turn left again. A weight grew in my stomach. Another street, another left. Those of you playing along at home may have realized by now that we were driving back towards the original street, the one we turned onto of the backwoods highway we started on. Sure enough, we got back to that road at that stop sign we drove through originally. The directions had us turn right onto that road, then take another right back onto the same highway, going the same direction we were to begin with. We didn't speak until we were miles away from there. I was getting gas in Portland, or about 6 years ago, shortly after leaving the Horse Brass pub after having dinner with a couple of friends. I don't remember which gas station it was, but I recall it being a few blocks from Horse Brass. It should be noted that in the state of Oregon you're not allowed to pump your own gas. The station attendant was an old, bearded white guy with a steely look in his eyes. I told him to fill up the tank, and he did so, saying nothing. After he was done, he leaned in close to my window and whispered in a gravelly voice, "You see that guy over there?" He motioned toward the corner of the building where a young black man was pacing nervously. "He's getting ready to kill me." I said, "Really? How do you know?" "I can see it in his eyes. I ain't afraid of him. I already been dead once." I had no idea what to say, so I just paid and got the frick out of there. My friend who was in the passenger seat was really stoned and it freaked him out so bad he was on the verge of tears. I am still completely dumbfounded and creeped out by that experience. Probably got hit by a car way back when and resuscitated on the road or something. So me, some of my buddies, and all of our dads decide that we should have a nice camping trip where we all do manly things and bond with each other. So we do some team building exercises, play some football, cook hot dogs and s'mores, etc. Then decide to hit the hay. Well, around 3 in the morning we hear rustling, very loud rustling coming from across the creek we pitched camp on. The rustling eventually progresses to splashing and indistinct mumbling and moaning, slowly getting closer to our campsite. So we are all starting to freak out a bit until one of the dads calls out WHO's there, no answer. Someone decides to grab a flashlight to investigate. The investigation turned up a hopelessly lost and ridiculously drunk college kid flailing around in the creek. The dads help him out of the water, dry him off, and take him where he needed to go. Apparently, some of his friends thought it would be funny to ditch him on the side of the road and he wandered several miles onto the piece of farmland we were camping on. It was actually pretty providential though, because if he would have wandered further in the direction he was going he would have fallen from the couple foot deep creek into a 20 or so foot deep swimming hole. So we very well might have saved that guy's life that night. That is not friends at all, freaking see. My brain. Oh look, a spooky post me. No brain, we're about to go to bed. My brain. Oh come on, just real quick. Me. No. Brain. That's a terrible idea. My brain. LOL, deal with it, and that's why I'm not asleep right now. This one is creepy and scary. When I was younger, like 10 or 12, I had an obsession with checking dark corners, just to make sure nothing is there. One night I went to get a glass of water from the kitchen. For some reason the sliding door to the kitchen is closed. Not an uncommon thing in my house. As I'm getting water, I look to the corner. It looks particularly dark, but I'm trying to break this habit of checking dark corners, so instead of turning on the lights to check, I instead wander back to bed in my half asleep state and close the kitchen door on my way out. That night my house was robbed. He got in from the kitchen patio door. TLDR. I may have looked a robber directly in the eyes as he was robbing my house without realizing it. When I was younger, my aunt used to say, when she watched us, that if we were not good she would take us to Wally Booger's house. We called BS one day to her while we were driving. We were acting like little buttholes, so she said that it turned around and drove to what she thought was an abandoned house to show us where he lived. When she pulled up in the driveway she says, "Do you want me to drop you off here?" All of a sudden, some skinny old man in just sweatpants came running out of the house screaming and waving a big knife. We started screaming, including my aunt, and she got the frick out of there. We cried for an hour and begged her to never take us there again. Years later I found out the gentleman has lived in his home for 15 plus years without electricity. He died about 5 years ago and they found some creepy crap in his home, including bones of animals he had butchered, set up in a shrine-like fashion in one of the rooms. Holy crap. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.